There we go. Hi, guys. Hello, everyone. Thanks for
Hi.
coming and joining us. Waiting for Sarah here, just waiting for her to connect and get up on stage. Alex, we need to see your video. We can't see your video.
Sorry, I'm just working on that. Oh my God.
In the meantime, Renzo, maybe I'll just ask you, can some of the questions that we had in the main stage chat while we're waiting on getting started here. Just give them another minute. What do you guys do with the private landowners? Can they be encouraged to protect habitats with conservation easements?
Yeah, we're currently working with one particular private owner, which is the owner of a cattle ranching area that is around 1,200 hectares. And he's been very interested in allocating part of the land, particularly that is not used by his cattle, for conservation. And actually, he was the one that contacted us to look into ways to officialize the conservation of that particular piece of land. So I mean, of course, we can get some subsidies to promote these conservation efforts on private lands, but probably that would be more adequate for private lands that are owned by local communities, by several owners. For the case of private owners, that probably one small family that owns a parcel that is in key spectacular habitat, probably the best way to approach them is by signing a commitment to allocate part of that area that is not being used, because in that way it's more sustainable in the long term, I think.
Nice, interesting. Linda Tabor-Beck's asking, how many acres do you need to buy to complete the corridor, and what's the average cost of an acre?
Alex, you want to take that?
I think we need to buy, what we want to do is buy as much land as we can, because as Lorenzo said, there's no many private landowners with. I'm having some problem with the
Now, there's like an echo going on. Kelly, can you hear me? Kelly? Alex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Kelly? I think it's working fine now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
we got it. Go ahead.
Sorry for that. Yeah, as I was saying, as we want to do is to purchase all land as possible, but we are very interested in the pieces that have critical resources for the bears, like food, air, where all the food is concentrated, and that's very specific areas around all the corridor. But and the price of the land is, well, it varies depending on the quality of the land and how is the distance from the land to the valley, to the middle of the valley. So we can find from 1,000 to 5,000 dollars per acre. And yeah, so it's very depending on the area we want to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's.
Robin's having some technical difficulties getting in here, but they are working on it with her. Another question that we had in the main stage chat was that Leticia was asking, it seems like this is, there we are. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Robin.
Great. I was just about to ask a question from the main chat, which is, it seems like this is a species that's already on the edge of physiological tolerance. How is climate change projected to alter the bear's habitat? for food, water, all that stuff.
Right.
Is that you, Renzo?
Sure. Well, I think in several ways and not in good ways, because first, as you've seen in the videos, bears really depend on these permanent water holes that we call highways, and they are key for their survival. I mean, not only because they provide a key essential resource, meaning water, but also because a lot of the dry forest bird ecology is centered around these water holes. So probably in a global warming scenario where temperatures are going to increase, the amount of water that's going to be available and the amount of forest cover around these water holes are going to be reduced. And also, from a food availability point of view, zapotes, as you've been hearing, it's very important for birds, particularly for females during pregnancy, for producing milk, etc. And the phenology of the zapote plants are very much in relation with the weather conditions in the dry forest, and flowering and fruiting, it's very much related to the temperature, to the average temperature and the amount of sun. So if we have changes in the way the temperature shows up in the zapote areas in the lowlands, I mean, if it's probably higher, then the zapote trees are going to fruit earlier in the season when the females are not in that much requirement of the zapote fruits. And when they get to their giving birth and producing milk, they are not going to have the fruits. So they are going to be emaciated and with very poor conditions, and probably cap survivals are going to be very low.
Interesting. Robin, can you speak to how the people in the communities feel about the bears? Are local people in support of the bears, or is there still a lot of conflict there?
Yeah, so we don't have human direct conflict like they do in many other places, with cattle going in and killing goats and their cattle and things like that. Conflict because cattle is one of the main reasons that so much of the land is being destroyed. But going back to that question that somebody had asked me just after the presentation about about bears and how did we find them in this area. So most people had no idea that there were even bears in this area. And so back in 2007, 2008, when we started monitoring Laura and found other bears, we started communicating with all the local villages and telling people that there were bears. And when we asked them, do you know what also the anteojos is, or a spectacled bear? They're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But in fact, it was an anteater. So they're black and white. So they're like, yeah, it's black and white. So at the beginning we thought, oh yeah, these people know that there's bears here. We didn't hear that. But anyways, as it turns out, it was an anteater. And so the news sort of started to travel, and everyone started hearing that there's bears in our backyard. And then we had a couple of newspaper articles coming out, and people were so excited. And I think, when you have so little, land is really important, but also what's on that land, and the fact that there was this incredible species. And for Peru, that's one of their focal conservation species. And so knowing that was in their backyard, I think got everybody so excited, and the children, the community leaders. And so for us, it was a big positive. I mean, there are challenges with the conflict, is that we can't just tell people don't go in and collect firewood and try not to disturb the bears, but because they are excited, it gives us something positive to work with and to find ways of working around this together. So yeah, it's been a good experience on that.
Interesting. I just want to remind people that if you've got questions, you can put them in the chat here and we'll get to them. If you'd like to request access to audio and video to come up and ask a question in person, we can do that too. So let's see. Shivani's asking a question. You may have covered this earlier. Just wondering how you guys and also the community landscape recovered from all the impacts of the wildfires.
I can take that one. That's a great question, Shivani. So we can't quantify it, but we had some pretty tough years. And actually, Shivani was able to come down and see our field site, and just the following year after she left, basically everything she saw burned. And so I'm sure that's why she's leading into that question. And yeah, we haven't recovered in the way that one would expect. And I know Renzo can touch on a bit more about some of the trees and things that are lost that take a long time to grow. there are some positives in that. One of the key foods in this area that burned is vaccinium, like a blueberry family, and it does recover quite quickly. And so we have started to see things green up and start to come back and provide more land for bears. The problem is we know that a lot of bears were killed and we can't afford to lose any bears. And so that's going to take another generation of reproduction and species to be able to get those numbers back. And the long-term effect on that, I know Renzo, you had talked about that. Maybe you can give a bit more insight into the overall impact on the ecosystem that the fires have had, what the fires have done in the upper region and the lower region. I think somebody asked that in the
yeah,
session.
okay. Well, I mean, the impact of the fires was devastating, and it burned probably in the areas where we work approximately 10,000 hectares or something like that of forest. And since the temperature in that upper part of the basin is low, particularly during the night, the trees take a long time to grow. So recovery under natural circumstances is going to take probably several decades. We estimate probably around 50, 60 years. That, and also because, I mean, the impact is also has like an economic dimension, because most of these communities, they do rely on wood for making some cash, also for taking material for construction. So the amount, I mean, the impact of the fire is being so visible and so vast that people really realize that they were having troubles because of the wildfires that are used for agriculture, and that kind of has opened their minds to try to adopt new techniques to better control fire.
Great. It's definitely something we're all struggling with here in the US and all across the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Alex Delgado is asking, how can we protect the bears from being poached for COVID-19?
Yeah, I saw it. That's a great question. And I think, well, poaching isn't our main threat. It's always a major cause for concern. And so I think if any of you have had the chance to see our newsletter back at the beginning of COVID back in March, the Chinese government was saying that bear bile was one of the key ingredients to help with COVID and cough. And so as soon as you hear things like that, natural or wildlife or whatever you want to call it, medicine is still pretty heavily used in Peru. So we can go to the black market in the city nearby and there's always bear parts and other parts of wildlife. And so when we heard that, that was a pretty big concern for us, that there was going to be an increase of poaching, which I imagine, we've seen over the last couple of months. And so I think that just emphasizes the importance for us now to purchase these private land parcels. And we've said having a presence in these areas is so important because it deters hunters. So it's not just about having a protected area and having a title, but just having a presence. So knowing that there's an NGO there all of the time. We've got, students involved in getting more data. I've got camera traps out, and people fear camera traps because they don't know where they are and they know that they're going to get photographed, which actually did happen in the last case when we had a camera trap stolen. So we put them at a water hole, but because the birds triggered the cameras all the time, we have them along trails nearby. And so the poachers steal the camera at the water hole, but they forget the ones along the trail because they didn't see them. So that's been helpful. So I think more than anything, we just can't let our guard down. We have to be out there all of the time, keep the camera traps running, keep our field teams out there. And now it's great because the quarantine in Peru was lifted. So for those 3 months, it was a pretty scary time for us. And we were trying to find ways. I kept saying to Renzo and Alex and the team, like, how can we get out there? I mean, can we not talk to the government or get a permission? I mean, we're not going to transmit COVID in the fields. We just need to be there because it was scary knowing that nobody was out there. So I think we're back on. We've got our teams out there. So I think we just need to keep at it.
It's the bear bile thing is just horrific. I'm wondering, Alex, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to SBC? You're the newest member of the team, and love to know a little bit about what brought you here.
Yeah, sure. Well, I met Robin, I think, 10 years ago. Yeah, when she started working in such amazing research with the bears. And yeah, in those times, I used to work for another NGO. And yeah, we were collaborating in the last years in common projects. And I just was very fascinated over the work of Robin and the SBC. So last year, I decided to leave my previous work I just wanted to do something different. And actually, I wanted to have more time in the field again, because most of the work I used to do in the last years was very the management of an organization. So right now I'm I'm feeling very good, because I'm combining this knowledge of what I can do in the conservation and the field work that I'm starting working with all the installing the camera traps, and I'm very fascinated about the bear. And then, yeah, just to add that, I have a story with the bear, because one of the big mammoths I saw in the field was a bear when I started working after I left the university. So I think I have a kind of very nice link with the bear. So I'm feeling I'm in the right place now.
It was your calling. It was absolutely meant to be. I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit more about how you engage some of those rural communities beyond just the Felty program, because I've had the fortunate opportunity to come down and visit with you and see some of that work, and it's pretty incredible how welcome you are when you walk into town and they know you. And maybe you could just talk about some of the other projects that are going on with local communities.
Okay, I can touch on that. And I think one of the things you see right across the board with all the WCM projects is how important communities are. And so while we all love wildlife and we're doing everything we can to protect them, without the communities and without the local people, you cannot do conservation. And so it's a combination of both. And in our case, you don't just walk into these villages and they're suddenly your best friend and they trust you and they know that you're there to help. And so building trust amongst these villages and communities is it's a long process, and it can take years to build up that kind of relationship. We're in an area that's been highly mined. There's a lot of legal mines, there's a lot of illegal mines, and there's a lot of promises that aren't kept. And so as soon as we walk in there, we're kind of on par with mining companies. And so we try to just start building those relationships. So at the beginning, it's just talking, it's just coming up there and meeting the people, you know, trying to really respect who the elders are in each of the community, the directors, also the teachers of a school. The director of the school plays a really important role. So we start there, and then we start holding sort of workshops and presentations, just talking more about the bears and telling people more about what's in the area. And then there's a lot of different activities that we do. So it just depends on what part of the watershed we are in. So the higher elevation, the 10,000, 11,000 feet area, those indigenous communities are very rural. They do a lot of agriculture. They do cooking on stoves and things like that. And they don't have a lot of exposure to better practices for agriculture. So one of the projects that we were getting a lot of support from Alex on, and with Nature and Culture International, was providing these kind of workshops. I'm sure, Alex, maybe you could just touch on a little bit about that with the greenhouses and trying to expand and help people with using their land a little bit better in these areas and creating better, getting more, I don't know what the right words are, turnover for their crops without having to burn more and more habitat. NCI had a lot of projects like that. I don't know if, Alex, you've got Mike, right?
He should be able to hear you. Maybe he didn't quite hear you there.
Or he's okay. Well, I can keep talking. There might be a delay. So that's one of the projects that we do. Also, we train up a lot of the local people as citizen scientists. So they're the ones collecting some information. These are all new areas for us. So we go into these new ecosystems. We have no idea what the bears are doing, what they're eating, where they're going. And so having more of these community leaders is just having eyes in the field when we're not there, before we can even get camera traps, because that's the last thing we can do with these communities. And then fires are another big one. So we do a lot of workshops on fires, just discussing how they can get out of control. Some of our field team, Jose, Jonathan, Isa, when there was major fires in 2016, they had sent the military up to try to help with the fire that was in Lucky Pampa National Wildlife Reserve. And basically the 200 military just walked out and said, there's nothing we can do. So Jose had coordinated with other team members to get the community together. We were able to help with equipment and get them shovels and ways and to get in there, and they actually were able to get this fire put out, which probably at the end of the day saved over 100 bears. And so then continuing that education further so that they know what they can do in case a wildfire does take off from their land, and so on and so on. So we have a number of different projects, but that's why it's important to build these long-term relationships and move between communities, and we have to adjust. So it's not just one shoe fits all, and we do have to work with that. The lower elevation is very different. But the one thing that we can do across the board is the Felty program. So we do that in every single place that we go, and we're trying to expand that as far as we possibly can, because that's what provides an income. It provides a relationship. It gives us an in, and then we can start talking with all the women, which then goes to the children and the husbands, and so on and so on. So there's different ways we do that, but it is so vital. And I think it's hard for sometimes people to understand how important that is actually in our work, because without that, there isn't anything. And for us, we need the community, but we also need the research. We need to get the cameras out. We need to do these studies. Otherwise, we don't know what we're protecting. So we need to be able to do
for
that.
Sure. So. I know, Robin, that you have a really big vision for spectacle bear conservation Peru and all that you guys can accomplish. Can you maybe talk about what's next and what's coming up for you guys?
Yeah, so we are a very small organization, but we're big in our hearts and we have big ideas, and we're going to see it through. We have no choice. This is a really important bear population. It's pretty isolated from the rest of the Andes, the dry forest in particular. There's only 100 to 150 bears left in this ecosystem. It's a biodiversity hotspot. These are probably genetically different bears and so on, and then the rest of the watershed as well. But we don't just stay in this one little area, and so we were able to expand up into the higher regions of this watershed. But since coming on board with WCN 5 years ago, it's sort of changed the way we've looked at things. And I mean, it was not ideal, but I guess the way I used to look at conservation was, what can I do with the funding that I have? And WCN has shown us a different way of looking at it. What do I need to do to ensure that this population will be there indefinitely? And that's a very different approach. And so we have to look at what that looks like and how are we going to do that? And we plan on doing that by purchasing private land. That's our biggest goal at this present moment. So we're just launching a land purchasing campaign. It's not all by itself, and we have to work on private protected areas with Indigenous communities and work together with the national parks. But it's that combination together. And so our vision for the next 5 years is, as you saw on the map, to have this one big area for bears so that population can move freely between them. But our plan is to continually scale up that program so it will be growing. So once that's accomplished, then we've got another 5 years. And ultimately, if that green line that you saw on that map can just keep growing to the next watershed and the next watershed, and hopefully we just keep finding bears, and hopefully, it's not too late and we're able to connect them. And if we could get to the border of Ecuador, that would be our ultimate goal, so that we have one huge area that maintains populations.
I love that you're not big in size, but you're big in your hearts, and I think that's very true for you guys. You have a huge vision, but I have absolutely no doubt that you're going to get there. In the beginning, when we were still having some technical issues, we talked a little bit about how much land you need to purchase and the cost of that, and I just would like to revisit that now that we've got audio working and everybody's here, and get that answered for people.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll let Alex just talk about the price.
As I told you, the prices depends on the quality of the land, and depends on how far it is from the main part of the valley. So it can be from $1,000 to $5,000 per acre. So that is the range of prices that we were working with. And how much land should we purchase? That's a very interesting question. Our interest is to purchase all the land as we can. Also depend on if the land has the rights, the land title is registered, and the availability of the willingness of the owners. But the idea is to purchase all the land that we can in around this corridor, as Robin says.
And just to add to that, we've got it divided up into phases, and so it really depends on the support. But we are launching with the support of WCN this big land campaign, and so we're hopefully able to reach out as far as we possibly can across the U.S. and wherever anybody is interested in supporting this kind of project. But the 5-year vision is to raise around $1 million to buy the land, and we're looking at 200,000 acres approximately to purchase. This is key areas. So there's lots of land out there, and as everybody knows, bears need huge space. But we're not trying to buy those huge spaces. We're trying to buy the key feeding areas. So everything for bears, and in particular female bears, is linked to reproduction. So you increase your survival rate of your bear population if you can increase your reproduction and your reproduction success. And for them to do that right now, this is the biggest problem, is these females don't have access to high quality foods, and less every year. And so by protecting those pieces of land, it may only be 500, sorry, we keep using hectares. So, 2,000 acres are not huge parcels, but they maintain high density sapote fruit, novero fruit. And if those females can get to that, then that increases the survival rate tenfold. So that's really the important part. So, but yeah, we are looking for around 200,000 acres.
Great, thank you for that. Before we go, I'd love to know what your favorite thing about the bears is, all of you.
Oh, you're asking, especially for me, you're asking a bear lover to talk about the bears. That's that's a okay. I'll get my coffee and we can talk for a few hours. Well, for me personally, and I was lucky enough at the very beginning to spend my time with Isa, Jose, and Javier, and we lived for basically 5 years in the field, 250 days of the year with these bears. And I think one of the things I love most about them that was very different than my work here in Canada with black bears and grizzly bears is they're so charismatic. And I know every animal has its own personality, but because they don't hibernate, they don't have this need to eat. And so they eat, they relax, they eat, they relax. And they are so playful. So we spent so many hours in the field watching them, and they would hang off of trees, and they'd scratch stuff, and then they'd start picking up leaves and throwing them down at us and picking up sticks. And it was like, wow, we're actually having these relationships with these bears. And so you don't really think about that with a carnivore. Spending time, I mean, we were just sitting a couple meters away from the bears. They would come close to us and then walk on by, and then they'd stop, and then they'd start playing. So it's like they were waiting to see our reaction. So I think, other than I'm sure Alex and Brenda will talk about it, but for me, it was just that relationship with the bears and seeing how each one was so different. Their personalities were so different. Like Chris just had such a bad attitude and he was so annoying. And then Marco, it's like he just goes around trying to pull down every camera trap he can because he thinks he's just, he is the dominant male and he just thinks he rules the roost there. So, and it's just so fun getting to know them and seeing them. And I think that makes it extra special, but also so much more emotional. And as Kelly knows, my first year at Expo, I just kept crying because I was just so excited that someone was going to help us save them and be on our team. So, but they are such beautiful animals. And if you do have a chance to log into YouTube or our website and see some of the videos and see their personalities, it does come out in those videos. Actually, Marco there in the water hole with the leaves, and he's such a funny bear. But I won't keep talking.
That's great. Renzo, how about you? What's your favorite thing about the bears?
Well, I think, they as Robin said, they have weird personalities individually. But one thing that, there are two traits of their ecological behavior that really amazes me. First is the fact that they survive part of the year by eating trees, which is probably, I haven't heard of any large mammal in the neotropics that does that. And the other thing is that, when I was in the university and probably a few years after that, I was doing a lot of rock climbing in Peru. And the fact that these birds are also rock climbers, they are so cool. So that's the two things that I like the most about the spectacle birds.
Great. Alex?
Yeah, I was very amazing how this big mammal is adapted to such a hard ecosystem as the dry forest. It's incredible, the capacity of adaptation that this species has. And the other thing that amazed me is the capacity to have this species to reach people. People love the bears. I know my kid has a small puppet like a bear, so everyone loves bears. And I saw that as a good option to use it to increase their awareness of all the people around, authorities to join the efforts to work in conservation, using bears as a charismatic species, as a flagship species. So I think that is that is amazing to me. It's how we can use these species to protect many other species that is in the same ecosystem.
Yeah, I would agree. Those bears are just they get you right in the heart, right? They're just so cute and so much personality. We are out of time, but if you have more questions, please feel free to join Robin and Renzo and Alex in their booth at some point. We've also got an extra special guest with Renzo here. He's been doing some amazing multitasking, as Rocio said. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us. You know, you can support SBC by buying Felty. I will tell you, they make great Christmas gifts. You can support and join the land campaign. There's all kinds of things that you can do to help save spectacle bears in the wild. And I just want to thank all of you for being here with us today, for hanging out with Spectacle Bear Conservation Peru, and for learning more about these incredible animals. Robin, Renzo, Alex, thank you guys as well so much for your time and for telling all of us about spectacle bears.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Kelly, and thanks WCN for putting on this incredible virtual expo. It's so nice to even see people virtually if we're not in person, and to all the people who have taken the time out of their Saturday to listen and learn about spectacle bears. And again, we always appreciate everybody's support. It's kind of keeping us going, especially during these hard times. So big bear hugs to everybody. Thank you.
All right, guys, we will see you.